Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who joins us from around the world. We're so glad you're here.
We are.
This is Andrew and Renee. Welcome to the Stack series. Today we are exploring the mathematics and biology of aging populations.
It's great to be here. And this is a topic I've been really looking forward to getting into.
Oh yeah? Why is that?
Because usually when we talk about aging, it's so personal. It's about, seeing a new wrinkle, or your back starts hurting, or maybe you're worried about your parents' health.
Right. It's very micro, very individual.
Exactly. But today we get to zoom out. Way out. We're looking at aging as this huge structural force, a mathematical biological machine that's reshaping our entire world.
It really is a beast of a topic. I have to admit, when I first got the stack of research for our discussion, we're looking at actuarial tables, papers on evolutionary biology, some pretty dense differential equations. My first thought was, okay, this is going to be a bit dry.
Uh-huh. I can see that.
But then I started reading, and I had this moment where I realized this isn't just about getting old. This is about the fundamental rules of the game. It's the source code for how life works and then stops working.
That is the perfect way to put it. It's the rule book.
It really is. And, I feel like every time I open a news app, I see that phrase, silver tsunami. It's always presented in this, panicked way.
Yeah, like a disaster movie poster.
Exactly. It's framed as this giant wave that's going to crash and wipe out pension funds, and the economy's going to collapse because we have too many grandparents and not enough workers. But after going through these papers, that metaphor just feels too simple.
It is too simple. It's not a wave. A wave is a one-time event. This is a permanent change in the landscape.
A structural transformation.
We really are seeing that. For almost all of human history, the shape of our population looked like a pyramid. A proper one.
Right. Lots of babies at the wide base.
Lots of babies at the bottom, fewer kids above them, even fewer adults, and then this tiny, tiny little point at the top for the elderly. It was a stable structure for millennia.
And now,
in what is really just the blink of an evolutionary eye, the last 100 years or so, we've completely changed that architecture. It's becoming more like a column or even an inverted pyramid in some countries.
And the scale is just... It's hard to wrap your head around. We're not just talking about money, though we will absolutely get to the terrifying pension numbers later on.
Oh, we will?
We're talking about the mathematical laws that seem to govern, with incredible precision, when and how we die. We're talking about the evolutionary reasons our own bodies seem to, decide to stop repairing themselves.
It's all about connecting the microscopic with the macroscopic.
Yeah.
That's our mission today. I genuinely believe you can't understand why the pension system in, say, Shanghai is facing a deficit unless you first understand what's happening inside the mitochondria of a single human cell.
It's all one long chain.
It is. It's a chain of cause and effect. The tiny energy trade-offs happening in your cells right now eventually become the massive budget trade-offs being debated in a nation's capital.
So lay out the map for us. What sources are we wading into today to connect those dots?
It's a pretty diverse stack. We're starting at the deepest level with biology. We'll be looking at the Disposable Soma Theory of evolution, which for me was a huge light bulb moment in understanding all this.
Okay, from there.
Then we move into the cold, hard math. There's this thing called the Gompertz-Makeham law, which is, it's basically the equation of death.
The equation of death. I have to say, that sounds like the title of a heavy metal album.
It really does, doesn't it? But it's terrifyingly precise. After that, we'll look at how we use that math to predict the future, the demographic models like matrices and calculus that governments use.
And then we bring it back to reality.
We bring it back to the real world. We'll do a deep dive into the case study of China's pension crisis, then look at a simulation study from England called Pericum that shows what aging actually feels like on the ground in terms of needing care.
Okay. And we wrap it all up with the economics of how on earth we pay for all this.
That's the plan.
All right, let's get into it. And I want to start with the thing that, honestly, it spooked me the most in the reading, the math. Specifically, this Gompertz-Makeham law.
It's a confronting idea, isn't it?
Confronting is a very polite way to put it. The core concept is that death isn't random. My individual death feels random. I don't know if a bus is coming around the corner tomorrow.
Of course.
But when you look at a whole population, it follows this terrifyingly precise mathematical curve. Who was this guy, Gompertz?
Benjamin Gompertz. He was a British mathematician and an actuary back in the early 19th century. And his job was basically to figure out when people die for the life insurance industry.
So he was in the business of predicting death.
He was, and he was looking at these long lists of who died and at what age. They called them mortality tables. And he just noticed a pattern that was too clean, too consistent to be just an accident. He realized that if you strip away all the random noise, human mortality doesn't just increase with age, it accelerates exponentially.
So the law breaks it down into two distinct parts. You have the Makeham term, and then you have the Gompertz term. Can you help me visualize those?
Absolutely. Let's start with component A, which is the Makeham term. The simplest way to think of this is as the background noise of being alive.
The static.
Exactly. This is the risk that they didn't care if you're 20 or 80. It's age independent.
Okay, so this is like getting struck by lightning or a freak accident.
Getting struck by lightning, a piano falling out of a window, a random pandemic that kills indiscriminately, getting hit by a meteor. It's what we call extrinsic risk. It comes from the outside world.
So if you were to graph it, it would just be a flat line.
A constant low horizontal line on the graph. Your risk of getting hit by that meteor is pretty much the same your whole life.
Okay, so that's the baseline. That's just the cost of doing business on planet Earth. But then there's component B, the Gompertz function. This is the one that gives the life insurance actuaries their careers.
This is the big one. This is the age-dependent term. This explains that exponential increase in what they call the force of mortality.
The force of mortality.
It's the instantaneous hazard of death. And this represents the internal degradation of the machine. It's the rust, it's the gears wearing out. And what Gompertz found, and what has been confirmed over and over for 2 centuries now, is that this internal breakdown follows a very strict mathematical schedule.
The source material mentions something it called the rule of 8.
Yeah.
I tried to explain this to my partner over breakfast, and I think I just ended up confusing both of us. Can you walk us through it slowly?
It's one of the most powerful empirical regularities in human biology. It's not a perfect law, but it's remarkably close. Here's the rule. Once you get past childhood and reach adulthood, your probability of dying in the next year doubles approximately every 8 years.
Every 8 years. That sounds incredibly fast when you say it like that.
It's relentless. Let's just play it out with an example. Let's say you're 30 years old. Your risk of dying in the next 12 months is very, very low. Let's say for argument's sake, it's about 1 in 1,000 or 0.1%.
Okay, I can live with those odds. I'm feeling pretty safe at 30.
You should. Now, let's fast forward 8 years. You're 38. Your risk has doubled. It's now roughly 0.2%. Still feels pretty low, right? You don't feel much different than you did at 30.
No, 0.2% is still, it's basically background noise to me.
Right. But the doubling continues. Fast forward another 8 years, you're 46, now it's 0.4%. Another 8, you're 54, it's 0.8%. Then at age 62, it's 1.6%.
And now I can see where this is going. It starts off so slowly you don't even notice it, but the nature of doubling means it catches up to you very, very quickly.
By the time you're 70, your annual risk is about 3.2%. By 78, it's 6.4%. By age 86, you're looking at nearly a 13% chance of dying that year. And by your mid-90s, you are essentially flipping a coin every year.
That is genuinely terrifying. It reminds me of that classic math problem, the grain of rice on the chessboard. You put 1 grain on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third.
And by the end, you have more rice than exists in the world.
Yes, except here, the rice is mortality.
That is a perfect analogy. Or think of it like a lottery, a terrible lottery. Imagine a giant glass bowl with 1,000 tickets inside. At age 30, only one of those tickets has your name on it for that year. But every 8 years, the lottery master doesn't just add one more bad ticket, he doubles the number of losing tickets in the bowl.
And the source mentioned something about how this looks on a graph.
Mm-hmm.
If you plot it in a specific way, it does something weirdly perfect.
It does. This is what clinches it as a mathematical law.
Yeah.
If you plot age on the bottom axis and the logarithm of the mortality rate on the side axis, you don't get a curve. You get an almost perfectly straight line, all the way from about age 40 to age 100.
Which means what exactly? A straight line on a log plot.
It means that the increase isn't just random biological messiness, it's a pure exponential function. A straight line on that kind of graph tells you we're dealing with a system that is failing according to a very rigid, predictable law.
It suggests that the human body, at least in the cold eyes of an actuary, acts just like a piece of technology, like a car engine or a light bulb filament.
Precisely. It has a predictable failure rate. And this is the bedrock of the entire life insurance and pension industry. They can't predict your death, Andrew. You might get hit by that make a meteor tomorrow. But thanks to Gompertz, they can predict the death rate of the entire group of people born in your year with frightening accuracy.
It effectively treats us all like machines.
In a statistical sense, we are.
And this whole concept also creates that bathtub curve we saw in the notes. I've heard engineers talk about this with electronics like hard drives.
It's the exact same principle. If you map the failure rate of a product or a human over its entire lifespan, the graph looks like a cross-section of a bathtub. You have a very high failure rate at the very beginning.
Infant mortality.
Yes, that's the steep wall on the left side of the tub.
Because babies are just fragile. Getting born and surviving that first year is, evolutionarily speaking, one of the most dangerous things you can do.
Absolutely. Then, assuming you survive childhood, the curve drops dramatically. The risk plummets to its lowest point. That's the long, flat bottom of the cup. Those are your teenage years and your early 20s. You are physically at your most robust.
But then,
Gompertz kicks in. The curve starts to slope upwards, gently at first, and then it goes almost vertical. That's the steep wall on the right side of the tub.
and for most of human history, our big struggle was with the left side of that tub. We were just trying to get kids to survive to adulthood. We were fighting infections, the Makeham noise.
Correct. And public health has been a stunning success story in that regard. We've gotten very good at suppressing the Makeham term. Sanitation, antibiotics, vaccines, seatbelts, all of that pushes the background noise down.
But we haven't really touched the right side of the tub.
We haven't fundamentally changed the Gompertz slope. We've maybe pushed the whole curve a bit to the right, but that steep wall is still there waiting for every single one of us.
Which brings us to the biggest question of all, the big why. If natural selection is all about survival of the fittest, if the whole point of this biological game is to stay alive and keep your genes in the pool, why haven't we evolved to live forever? Why does the Gompertz curve even exist? Why don't our bodies just keep repairing themselves perfectly?
This is the absolute core question, and it brings us right into our next section, the evolutionary theories of aging. And the most compelling explanation we have is called the Disposable Soma Theory.
Disposable Soma. I have to say, of all the phrases in the research, that one really stuck with me. It sounds so cynical, so brutal, like we're just single-use plastic cups.
It is cynical, but nature is, if nothing else, a pragmatist, or maybe a ruthless economist. The theory was first really fleshed out by Thomas Crookwood back in 1977, and the whole idea is based on a fundamental principle, energy economics.
I loved this part of the reading because it makes the body sound like a small business trying to balance its books every month.
That's a perfect analogy. Think about any organism in the wild. It has a finite amount of energy available to it. It gets that energy from the food it eats, but finding food is hard. It costs energy to hunt. It costs energy to forage. So you have a limited budget of calories. Let's call it your monthly salary.
Okay, I've got my paycheck. Now where can I spend it?
You have two main departments in your company that are screaming for funding. Department 1 is reproduction. This covers everything from growing to maturity, finding a mate, producing eggs or sperm, gestating an embryo, giving birth, feeding your kids. It's incredibly expensive.
Okay, so that's the growth and expansion department. What's Department 2?
Department 2 is somatic maintenance. Soma is just the Greek word for body. So this is the repair crew. This is the department in charge of fixing broken DNA strands, producing antioxidants to clean up damaging free radicals, breaking down and recycling misfolded proteins. It's the team that keeps the factory or body in pristine showroom condition.
And the central argument of the theory is that I don't have enough money in my budget to fully fund both departments at the same time.
Not if you want to win the evolutionary game, no. And here is where the logic gets incredibly ruthless. Think about life in the wild, historically. Most animals die from what we call extrinsic mortality.
So things from the outside.
Predators, famine, freezing to death, accidents, disease. Most animals get killed long before they get old, in the way we think of it.
Right. A wild mouse isn't dying of Alzheimer's or congestive heart failure. It's getting eaten by a hawk.
Exactly. So let's run the numbers. If you are that mouse, and there is, say, a 90% chance that you are going to be eaten by that hawk within the first year of your life, does it make any financial sense for your body to invest a huge amount of its precious energy budget into building a heart that is designed to last for 20 years?
No, absolutely not. That's a terrible investment. You're building a state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line engine and putting it in a car that you know is going to be driven off a cliff in 10 miles. It's a complete waste.
It's a complete waste of resources. You are spending energy on long-term durability that you will almost certainly never get to use. So what does natural selection do? It's a smart investor. It shifts the budget. It slashes the funding for the maintenance department and pours all that cash into the reproduction department.
Have babies now as fast as you can and don't worry about fixing the leaky roof later.
Because for that mouse, there is no later. Evolution selects for genes that prioritize getting genes into the next generation as quickly and efficiently as possible, even at the cost of long-term durability. The body, the soma, becomes disposable once it has successfully passed on its immortal genes.
So the reason we age is because our bodies are programmed from day one to stop putting money into the repair budget, because they're running on an ancient assumption that we probably won't be living in the house long enough for the crumbling foundation to matter.
That is the core of it. And we see evidence for this trade-off everywhere we look in the natural world. The sources highlighted comparisons between different animals. Why do you think a turtle can live for over 100 years, but a mouse of a similar size lives for maybe 2?
Well, based on this theory, it has to be about safety, about extrinsic mortality. Turtles have shells.
Bingo! The shell is an incredible evolutionary innovation. It dramatically reduces extrinsic mortality. The hawk can't eat the turtle. Because the turtle is so much safer, it has a much higher statistical probability of living a long time. Therefore, it pays for the turtle's body to invest in first-class maintenance. Evolution says, hey, this shell thing really works. You might actually be around for 50 or 100 years, so let's go ahead and build a body that can last that long.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it's not just a theory. The fruit fly experiments mentioned in the notes, they actually proved this trade-off exists in the lab, right?
This is one of the most elegant and classic experiments in modern biology. So scientists took a population of Drosophila, common fruit flies. Normally, fruit flies live fast and die young. They reproduce very early in their short lives.
Okay.
But the scientists decided to play a trick on evolution. In their experiment, they only allowed the old flies to reproduce. They would collect all the eggs laid by the flies, but they would discard the ones laid by the young flies. They only hatched and kept the eggs laid by the geriatric flies at the end of their lifespan.
So they created a new evolutionary pressure. All of a sudden, the only way to pass on your genes was to survive to old age first.
Exactly. They artificially removed the hawk. They made longevity a prerequisite for reproduction. And you can guess what happened after they did this for a few dozen generations.
The flies started living longer.
Much, much longer. They evolved bodies with better DNA repair mechanisms, more efficient antioxidant defenses. Their cells literally started investing more energy in the maintenance department. But, and this is the crucial part, there was a price.
There's the trade-off.
The long-lived flies became less fertile when they were young. You can't have it all. You can evolve a body that is built for the long haul, or you can evolve a body that reproduces aggressively and early, but you generally can't have both at maximum efficiency.
This theory really gives a powerful why for the Gompertz curve. The warranty on our bodies runs out because evolution didn't see the point in paying for the extended warranty.
That's a great way to put it.
But there are other theories in the stack, too, that sort of complement this one. What about mutation accumulation?
Yes, this was an idea from Peter Medawar back in the 1950s. It's a little more passive than the Disposable Soma Theory. Medawar's argument was that natural selection just stops caring about us after a certain age.
How can natural selection, this all-powerful force, just stop caring?
Well, think about a harmful genetic mutation. If you have a mutation that causes a fatal disease at age 3, what does natural selection do to it?
It gets wiped out immediately. Because if I die at 3, I don't grow up to have kids and pass that gene on. The gene is a dead end.
Correct. The force of natural selection against that gene is absolute. But now, what if you have a gene that causes, say, fatal heart failure, but only at age 80?
By age 80, I've already had my kids, and they've probably had their kids. The gene is already out there.
Exactly. You have already passed the mutation on to the next generation. The gene has escaped. Natural selection is effectively blind to it because its negative effects only kick in long after your reproductive phase is over. So over millions of years, the human genome has become a kind of dumping ground for all these late-acting deleterious genes. They just accumulate because there's no evolutionary broom powerful enough to sweep them out.
It's like a blind spot in the evolutionary rearview mirror. We're all carrying around these genetic time bombs that are set to go off only after we've fulfilled our primary biological purpose.
And then there's the third theory, which is maybe the most devious of all, antagonistic pleiotropy.
That is a mouthful. Let's break that down.
It is. Pleiotropy just means that a single gene can have multiple effects on the body. Antagonistic means those effects work against each other over time. So this is the idea that a gene might be very good for you when you are young, but very bad for you when you are old.
Like a deal with the devil.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Let's imagine a gene that boosts your body's calcium uptake and metabolism when you're 20 years old. That's great. You have stronger bones, your muscles contract more efficiently, you can run faster from predators, you fight better, you survive to have more kids. Evolution would absolutely love this gene. It would spread like wildfire through the population.
Okay, sounds good so far. What's the catch?
The catch is that this high-powered calcium-boosting mechanism never turns off. So by the time you're 60, that same gene is causing calcium to build up in the walls of your arteries. It's causing atherosclerosis. It's leading to heart disease.
But evolution doesn't care.
Evolution doesn't care at all. It already got the huge benefit when you're young and reproducing. The cost you pay in old age is, from a species survival perspective, irrelevant. We are a product of evolution trading a vibrant youth for a painful decline.
This ties back to a really interesting note in the source material about the idea of a biological clock. It mentioned that the body doesn't actually have a clock that counts years, does it?
No, not at all. Your cells don't have little calendars inside them. They have no idea that the Earth has orbited the sun 80 times. They only understand biological time.
And what is that measured in?
It's measured in damage. Your body measures age in the number of accumulated errors, the number of misfolded proteins, the length of your telomeres, the count of DNA mutations that went unrepaired. We measure our age in chronological time, but our bodies measure it in wear and tear.
Okay, so we have the biology of why we break down this trade-off, the disposable soma, these antagonistic genes, and we have the math that describes how fast that breakdown happens, the Gompertz curve. But now we need to bridge the gap from the individual to the entire society. How do governments take this messy, microscopic, biological reality and turn it into something they can use to make policy? How do you actually predict what a country is going to look like in 50 years?
This is the point where we leave the biology lab and we walk into the actuary's office. We have to talk about the mathematical models used to project populations. This is section 3 of our discussion.
And we have two main models that were mentioned in the stack. The first is the Leslie matrix. It sounds like a 1960s spy thriller, but I'm guessing it's a bit drier than that.
Just a little bit. The Leslie matrix is what we call a discrete model. The easiest way to think of it is as the buckets approach.
Buckets, okay, I can picture that.
Imagine you take the entire population of a country and you sort every single person into a series of buckets based on their age. You have one bucket for everyone aged 0 to 5. The next bucket is for everyone aged 5 to 10, then 10 to 15, and so on all the way up.
Everyone gets sorted into their age group.
Yes. Now, how do you figure out what the population will look like in 5 years? You use a matrix, which is just a big grid of numbers, and this matrix essentially tells you two crucial things about each bucket.
What are they?
The first is fertility. The top row of the matrix contains the birth rates. It asks, for the people in the 20 to 25 bucket, how many babies will they produce in the next 5 years?
And the second thing?
The second is survival. The numbers on the subdiagonal of the matrix represent survival probabilities. It asks, what is the chance that someone currently in the 20 to 25 bucket will survive for the next 5 years and successfully jump into the 25 to 30 bucket?
So it's a machine that takes a snapshot of the population today, applies the math of births and deaths, and then click it, produces a new snapshot for 5 years in the future.
That's it, exactly. It's very powerful, and it's very useful for computers because it deals in these discrete chunks of time. But it does have limitations. It's a bit grainy. It assumes things happen in these 5-year steps, and it also, as the source mentioned, usually only focuses on the female population.
Why only females?
Because statistically, women are the bottleneck for fertility. From a pure numbers perspective, you can have 1 million men and only 1 woman, and you're still only going to get 1 baby every 9 months or so. So the models simplify by just tracking the females.
That makes sense. But life isn't chunky like that. Life is a continuous flow. Which brings us to the really fancy one, the McKendrick-von Forster equation.
Now we're moving from discrete algebra into the world of calculus. This is a continuous model. So instead of thinking about buckets, I want you to imagine a conveyor belt.
Okay, I like the conveyor belt analogy.
Imagine an infinitely long conveyor belt that represents time. The moment a person is born, they are placed at the very beginning of the belt. And the belt moves forward smoothly, continuously.
And as it moves, people fall off.
People are constantly falling off the sides. That represents the death rate. And crucially, the rate at which they fall off changes depending on how far along the belt they are. Remember Gompertz.
The further down the belt you go, the higher the chance you fall off.
Exactly. And so this equation, this partial differential equation, is designed to track the density of people at every single millimeter of that conveyor belt at any given moment in time.
So why do we need the complicated calculus version? Isn't the bucket version good enough for most things?
The bucket version is fine for a rough, long-term forecast. But what if you want to model more complex, nuanced situations? Like, what happens if a new virus emerges that specifically targets people between the ages of 28.5 and 29.2?
The bucket model would miss that completely.
It would miss it. Or what if birth rates start to shift gradually over a period of months, not in a big 5-year jump? The McKendrick equation can capture that flow. It's a much higher resolution camera.
It's amazing how the same mathematical patterns just keep popping up in different fields. The note said this exact same equation was used for epidemiology, too.
Yes, it's fascinating. McKendrick first developed it in 1926 to track how diseases move through a population. Then, decades later, von Forster rediscovered it completely independently in 1959 to model how populations of cells divide and age.
So same math applies.
It's the same pattern of flow, survival, and reproduction. A nation is really just a macro population of human cells. The math works whether you're counting bacteria in a petri dish or counting taxpayers in a country.
And right now, for many, many nations, that flow of taxpayers is heading towards a cliff. We need to take this abstract math and apply it to the real world. Section 4, the China pension crisis.
This was probably the heaviest part of the stack for me personally, because we are taking these abstract actuarial models and we are pointing them at a very real, very massive system, China's urban employee basic pension plan.
The numbers that came out of this analysis are they're staggering. I had to read them a couple of times to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting a decimal place.
They are hard to comprehend. The data from the study predicts that China's main pension fund will be in a current deficit by roughly 2028.
2028. That's, depending on when you're listening to this,
Yeah.
that is practically tomorrow. That's not some far-off sci-fi problem.
It's imminent, and just to be clear, being in current deficit means that in that specific year, the money flowing out to pay current retirees is greater than the money flowing in from current workers. At that point, you have to start dipping into your savings account to cover the bills.
And once you start eating into your savings, it can spiral very quickly.
Incredibly fast. The study projects that if no major policy changes are made, the accumulated debt, the total shortfall, could reach 147 trillion RMB by the year 2050.
147 trillion. That number is so large it almost loses all meaning. It sounds like monopoly money.
To try and put it in perspective, that represents a massive, massive chunk of China's future GDP. It's an economic black hole that threatens to pull in funding from everything else.
So the researchers didn't just point out the iceberg. They tried to figure out ways to steer the ship. They ran simulations using the kinds of math we just talked about. What are the different levers that the government could possibly pull?
They looked at 3 main scenarios. The first one is the one everybody immediately talks about, fertility, reversing the effects of the one-child policy with the 2-child and now the 3-child policies.
The logic seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
We don't have enough young workers in the future. Well, let's make more workers.
Right. It seems intuitive, but the math in the simulation gave a very surprising and, for policymakers, a very frustrating result. Increasing fertility helps, but only in the very long run. It is effectively useless for stopping the immediate crisis over the next 20 years. In fact, in the short term, it might even make it slightly worse.
Wait, hang on. How does having more babies make a pension deficit worse?
Think back to our conveyor belt. A baby born today does not pay taxes. A baby is a pure consumer, not a producer. It takes at least 20, maybe 22 years for that baby to be educated and to become a productive worker who starts contributing to the pension fund.
So there's a massive lag.
A 2-decade lag. And in the meantime, babies are expensive, not just for parents, but for the state healthcare education. And crucially, when families have more children, there's a tendency for parents, and let's be honest, specifically mothers, to reduce their working hours or leave the labor force to provide care. So in the short term, you can actually reduce the number of people paying into the system while you're increasing the number of dependents who rely on it.
That is just a cruel irony. The one thing that seems like a solution actually creates a bigger dip before you get any of the benefit.
It does.
So if making more babies won't save the system in time, what's the next option? The source called it the nuclear option.
Delayed retirement.
Nobody likes hearing that. Congratulations on a long life of hard work. Now you get to work 5 more years.
It's politically toxic. It's unpopular everywhere it's proposed. But mathematically, it is the magic bullet. The study was unambiguous on this point. Delaying the retirement age to 65 is the single most effective lever they can pull.
Why is it so much more powerful than the fertility fix? What's the mechanism?
It's because it hits both sides of the balance sheet at the exact same time. Think about a 60-year-old worker. Under the current system, they retire. In that moment, they stop being a person who pays into the pot, and they become a person who takes money out of the pot.
Okay, a contributor becomes a beneficiary.
Right. Now, if you pass a law that says, no, you have to work until you're 65, you completely flip that switch for 5 more years. For those 5 years, they are still contributing money. And for the same 5 years they are not taking money, you are simultaneously adding a payer and removing a payee from the books. It's a double whammy of fiscal relief.
That makes perfect mathematical sense.
Mhm.
But socially and politically, that's a very hard thing to implement.
It's incredibly hard, but the simulation suggests that if they do it, and do it effectively, it could ensure that there is no accumulated deficit before the year 2050. It effectively solves the immediate problem.
But there's a catch with this one too, isn't there? The notes mention diminishing returns.
Yes. It's not a permanent fix. The positive effects are incredibly strong for the first 15 years or so, but after that, the sheer force of the demographic tide is just too strong. Those people you delayed eventually do retire. You've just pushed the wave back a bit, you haven't stopped it.
And we can't talk about China without acknowledging the legacy of the one-child policy. The source mentioned the 4-2-1 family structure. This is the visual that, for me, just breaks my heart.
It's an incredibly precarious social structure. It means you have 4 grandparents supported by 2 parents, who are in turn supported by 1 single child.
That one child is the entire base of this inverted pyramid. When those 4 grandparents get frail and the 2 parents get old, that one person is shouldering the financial and emotional burden of supporting 6 elderly people.
It's an immense pressure. The Leslie matrix for China is becoming extremely dangerously top-heavy. By 2030, a quarter of the entire world's elderly population will be living in China. The sheer scale of the care that will be required is something unprecedented in the history of humanity.
And speaking of care, that's the perfect transition. Let's move away from the trillions of yuan and the abstract models and look at what this aging population actually looks like in a living room, in a hospital.
We have this study from England called PASSISM. This is section 5.
This is a really crucial shift in perspective. The big actuarial models, like the ones we've been talking about, they count heads. Their main question is this person alive or are they dead? That's the binary. PASSISM, the population aging and care simulation, it counts health. It asks a different question. It asks, is this person independent or do they need help to put on their socks in the morning?
Because there's a world of difference between being 85 and running marathons and being 85 and being bedbound, and that difference has a huge cost.
Monumental cost,
Yeah.
exactly. So what PASSISM does is it classifies the elderly population by their interval of need.
Let's break those categories down because I think this really gets at the texture of what aging feels like. Okay, so at the top, you have high dependency. This is someone who needs 24-hour care. This is a person who likely needs help with basic activities of daily living, like toileting, feeding, and moving safely. They cannot be left alone.
This is what we typically think of as nursing home level care or requiring a full-time family carer at home.
Correct. Then you have medium dependency. This might be someone who needs help getting dressed in the morning or with cooking their meals, but they can safely sit in a chair and watch TV by themselves for a few hours. Then there's low dependency. Maybe they just need help with a weekly bath or with heavy housework like vacuuming. And finally, you have independent.
So what did this simulation predict is going to happen in England between 2015 and 2035?
It showed this fascinating and I think slightly counterintuitive divergence in the population. First, the good news. The young old, that's people aged 65 to 74, are actually getting healthier over time. The rates of dependency in that age bracket are dropping.
So 70 really is the new 60. We sort of see that anecdotally. People are staying active longer.
They are. But then you have the old. That's the group aged 85 and over. For this group, the number of people with high dependency, the ones needing 2,147 care, is predicted to almost double. We are talking about a 91.8% increase in just 20 years.
So we are creating a massive cohort of extremely frail people who require constant intensive care. But here's the part of this study that really surprised me, and I want to spend a moment on it. The gender paradox.
This is one of the most consistent and in some ways perplexing findings in the entire field of gerontology.
Men and women age very, very differently.
Significantly differently. The data from the simulation shows that men are experiencing what's called a compression of dependency.
Compression of dependency. What does that mean in plain English?
It means that, on average, men tend to stay healthy, independent, and active for a very long time, and then they tend to fall off a cliff. They get sick and they die relatively quickly. The period of being frail and needing care is compressed into a short time at the very end of life.
So they have a long health span and a short sick span.
That's the perfect terminology. The model shows men are projected to gain about 4.2 years of life expectancy, and almost all of those extra years are lived independently.
But for women, it's a different story.
It's the opposite story. Women are experiencing an expansion of dependency. They are living longer than men, they consistently have a higher life expectancy, but a significant chunk of that extra time is spent living with low, medium, or high care needs.
So a woman might survive the sudden heart attack that would have killed her husband, but she survives with chronic heart failure that leaves her unable to walk upstairs or carry her own groceries for 10 years.
That is a very common scenario described by the data. It's often attributed to the types of diseases that are more prevalent in each sex. Men are more prone to acute fatal killers like sudden heart attacks, fatal strokes, certain aggressive cancers. Women are more prone to chronic disabling disablers, things like arthritis, osteoporosis, frailty, and non-fatal strokes. They survive, but they survive with needs.
And that has enormous implications for the social care system. If you walk into any long-term care facility in 2035, it's going to be overwhelmingly female.
It will be. And the care they require is going to be incredibly complicated by another factor the study highlighted: multimorbidity.
Which is the fancy medical term for just having more than one thing wrong with you at the same time.
Correct. We used to have this model of medicine where we treated patients for a thing. You have heart disease, we treat the heart disease. You have dementia, we manage the dementia. But the PACES study predicts that by 2035, 80% of older people who have dementia will also have 2 or more other chronic conditions alongside it.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare for doctors to manage.
It's an incredibly difficult puzzle. Imagine trying to treat a patient who has dementia, congestive heart failure, and diabetes all at once. The medication you give them for the heart failure might lower their blood pressure, which makes them dizzy, which dramatically increases their risk of falling.
And because of the dementia, they can't remember to use their walker to stay safe.
Exactly. And the strict diet you need to manage their diabetes might be impossible to enforce because their dementia causes them to forget they've already eaten. Every treatment interacts with every other condition.
So you can't just treat one disease in isolation anymore. You have to manage the entire complex system of a failing body.
It turns geriatric care from a series of specialist tasks into a complex systems management problem. And our medical systems, which are still very siloed, we have heart specialists and brain specialists and kidney specialists. We don't have enough complexity specialists.
And this connects right back to the disposable soma theory we started with, doesn't it? The
Right.
body isn't just breaking down in one place, it's falling apart in multiple systems simultaneously. Because the evolutionary warranty on all the parts expired around the same time.
Precisely. It is systemic failure, not just a single broken component.
Okay, so we've covered the biology, the math, the demographics, and the on-the-ground reality of care. Let's finish with the wallet. Section 6. The economics of saving in a graying world. We looked at a paper from the IMF about how people's saving habits change or don't change in this new reality.
This brings us to what the paper called the young agents problem.
Which sounds like a spy thriller, the Bourne Identity, but with 401ks and retirement planning.
It's actually a core concept in behavioral economics. If you are a young worker today, let's say you're 25 or 30 years old, how much should you be saving for retirement? The economic model suggests that your decision depends heavily on what you believe the government has promised you.
This is the substitution effect.
Right. Think of it in a really simple way. If your parents call you up and say, we're all going out for dinner tonight and we promise we will pay for everything, you probably won't bring your own cash to the restaurant.
I'm ordering the most expensive steak on the menu, and I'm keeping my wallet in my pocket.
Exactly. For decades, if the state provided a generous defined benefit pension where they promised to pay you a set income for the rest of your life after you retire, you, as a rational economic agent, would save less of your own private money. Why would you? The government is doing the saving for you. This is the substitution effect. Public savings replace private savings.
But that whole world is changing. Most systems are shifting away from that promise and moving towards defined contribution.
Yes. This is the you eat what you kill model. The government is no longer promising you a result. They're just providing you with a bucket and telling you it's your responsibility to fill it. In that world, private savings must rise dramatically to make up the difference.
And here's the really weird part of the puzzle. As life expectancy rises, a purely rational young person should be saving massive amounts of money.
They absolutely should. If you know you are very likely going to live to be 95 and you want to retire at 65, You are facing the prospect of funding 30 years of unemployment. That requires an enormous amount of capital. A rational 25-year-old should be acting more patient in economic terms. They should be delaying gratification, not buying the new car, not taking the expensive vacation, and just dumping money into their retirement accounts.
There. Are they actually doing that?
That is the trillion-dollar question. The economic model indicates that to maintain the same standard of living that their parents had in retirement, the current young generation must both save significantly more and work significantly longer if they don't do both.
If they don't, they're going to hit a brick wall when they turn 65.
There will be a massive, shocking drop in their consumption and standard living when they retire. We're talking about widespread poverty in old age. And the source mentioned the example from Germany, which I found really powerful and heartbreaking.
Yeah, that really stuck with me too.
We are already seeing a trend of retirees re-entering the workforce. And we are not talking about the high-powered CEO who gets a little bored of playing golf and decides to do some consulting on the side. We are talking about people in their 70s taking low-wage service jobs because their pension isn't enough to cover the heating bill and the rising cost of food.
It just highlights that these pension deficits we talk about aren't just numbers on a government spreadsheet. They are elderly people bagging your groceries because they have no other choice.
And this creates an urgent need for what the economists call flexible working hours and lifelong training. If we are all going to be working until we're 70 or 75, we can't possibly be expected to do it using only the skills we learned in college when we were 20.
The entire idea of a career has to change. It's not a single sprint from age 22 to 62 anymore. It has to become a marathon with multiple interval training sessions built in. You have to be able to stop, learn a completely new set of skills, and then start running again.
It requires a complete rethink of our education systems. Why does university have to end at 22? If you're going to be in the workforce until you're 75, maybe you need to go back to university at 40 and then again at 60 to retool for the next phase of your working life.
So let's bring this all home. What does this all mean when you put it together? Let's try and synthesize this in our final section. We've gone from the inside of a cell all the way to global economics.
It really is a single, coherent story when you lay it all out. The Disposable Soma Theory gives us the biological why. It explains that our bodies are the product of an evolutionary trade-off between durability and reproduction. That trade-off makes aging inevitable. We simply weren't built to last forever.
And then the Gompertz-Makeham law gives us the how fast. It takes that biological principle and turns it into a mathematical formula, predicting the exponential rise in failure rates that results from that built-in obsolescence. It puts the biology on a curve.
Then you have the Leslie matrix and the McKendrick-von Forster equation. Those are the tools that demographers and actuaries use to take that curve and project it across millions of people into the future. They are the instruments that allow us to see the demographic wave coming from decades away.
And the China case study and the PACESIM model show us the real-world results of that wave hitting the shore. A massive, top-heavy demographic structure that brings with it huge financial deficits and incredibly complex, multi-layered care needs for the very old.
And finally, the economic models show us the profound behavioral shift that is now required from all of us. We can't just keep saving and working and planning our lives like it's 1950. The underlying reality has changed, so our behavior has to change to match it.
It feels like for such a long time, we as a society have viewed aging as a kind of surprise. Like, oh no, the pension fund is running low. How did this possibly happen? But when you look at this entire stack of research, it feels less like a surprise and more like a mathematical certainty that we should have seen coming since the very first cell decided to reproduce.
That, for me, is the ultimate philosophical takeaway. Aging isn't a biological accident, it's an evolutionary calculation, and societal aging isn't a sudden crisis. It is simply the sum of all those individual calculations playing out on a global scale. The great challenge of the 21st century isn't stopping aging. We probably can't ever beat the Gompertz curve. The real challenge is adapting our rigid social structures, our retirement ages, our hospital designs, our educational systems, our pension schemes, to match the fluid biological reality that the math has been screaming at us for decades.
We built a world designed for people who, on average, died at 65, and now we find ourselves living in a world where we live to 85 or beyond. The underlying math of our lifespan changed, so the architecture of our society has to change with it.
And honestly, Andrew, that is a much better problem to have than the alternative. The very fact that we are sitting here discussing the problems of old age is one of the greatest triumphs of human civilization. We succeeded. We beat the Makeham background noise. We stopped the children from dying of infections. Now we just have to figure out how to manage the bill for the long, healthy lives we won for ourselves.
Well said. It's a triumph, but it's a very expensive one.
It sure is.
Before we wrap up, thank you to all our partners, sponsors, and scholars who made this podcast and the research possible. We're truly grateful for your support. And to our listeners, thank you for being part of this journey with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow Stack Studios for more informative content, and support us in Patreon. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and let the search for wisdom guide you forward. Have a great day.